Why do businesses either fly, fail, or go into this, semi-state, if you like? And it's normally down to find foundational underpinning and not really having the right structures in place.
You're almost more like either the paramedics or the A-team of kind of, the SAS, kind of drop us in, we'll move quickly, we'll deploy, we'll understand, we'll embed into your organisation, learn what the problem is, good, bad, whatever, and deploy interventions to get things moving as quickly as possible.
We as a company only really go into businesses with the aim of trying to help. We're not there to be there for a long time. We want to be there when you're in that moment of crisis, help you in that moment of truth, and take you on to the next level. So that's what ArxNova is. It isn't a transformation company. It's a stabilisation and crisis management company.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Best in Class, the Business Excellence Podcast. So very pleased to have Chris Johnson from ArxNova with me today. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin. You okay? Nice to be here.
Good stuff. And we're going to talk about a topic today that isn't really covered that much, but definitely needs more awareness and a spotlight on it, because it might not happen in all organizations, but there's a strong chance it could happen. And you also need to have kind of due diligence in place in case something like this might happen. So it sounds a bit mysterious. So Chris, do you want to kind of just do an introduction of really, I guess, yourself, ArxNova, and what it is that you do, and that'll lift the lid on kind of what it is that we're going to be talking about.
Absolutely. So my background is in legal services. So prior to ArxNova, I've always worked in the professional services sector. I'm a chartered legal executive, and I'm one of the directors and co-founders of ArxNova, which was basically formed from a crisis situation. I've got two directors. One is a specialist in marketing, Simon, and Joan Maudsley, who is an expert in operational management and basically supply chain, anything to do with that type of thing. He's much better at that than me. Our real offering is really to give businesses that are going through transitions. Now, transitions can be positive and they can be negative. When you set off on a business, you never really want it to be negative, or you never really think it's going to be negative. So what happens is businesses set off and they either go extremely well, which can cause real issues, or they can go really badly, or they can sometimes go into this hybrid phase where they do well in the short term, but long term, they haven't got the foundations to go in the right way. So what we decided is, why is that? Why do businesses either fly, fail, or go into this, semi-state, if you like? And it's normally down to find foundational underpinning and not really having the right structures in place. Now, every business consultant will tell you that. But what the difference from our perspective is, all three of us as directors have either led businesses or ran their own business. So, and because we're cross-functional, we always go in. Doesn't matter what stage a business is in, of them three pillars, we are there to really help you with that crisis. Because, and the word crisis comes across in such a negative connotation, but if you are growing and it's getting out of control, it's a crisis sometimes. It's a positive crisis. If you are facing the fact that you haven't got enough money to pay the wages, that's an extreme crisis from a financial situation. But also, if you're in a stagnant state and you can't move forward, that's a crisis in itself. The word crisis isn't really meant to be any form of, oh no, we need to bring you in because we don't know what to do. It's just sometimes having an outside lens who's actually been in the same situation as you is the real differential delta that pulls you into the next level, gets you into the next phase. And that's what ArxNova is. It's about practitioners working with you. It's not about consultants who, I haven't got an MBA, I've got a law degree, and I've literally learned my craft on the tools, if you like. So we as a company only really go into businesses with the aim of trying to help. We're not there to be there for a long time and drain cash reserves and do where we want to be there when you're in that moment of crisis, help you in that moment of truth, and take you on to the next level. So that's what ArxNova is. It isn't a transformation company, it's a stabilization and crisis management for company. So that's a very
Interesting.
long-winded answer to your
No,
question.
no, it's no answers really, short answers these days, are they? It kind of made me smirk a little bit because if my background kind of comes from recruitment and HR, and especially when I was in my HR phase, there was always the kind of the connotation around performance reviews, and you'd have performance reviews every kind of monthly, 6 monthly, annually, and there was always that negative connotation around that because it was all people took it as what have I done wrong? But a
Mhm.
performance review in its original sentiment is really just let's come in and talk about your performance, good, bad, neutral, however it may be. How can we get the best out of you? How can we create an environment that helps you blossom and perform better? Or if you're not performing, why are you not performing? Let's get to the root of that and then put in interventions in place or systems and support that may be needed. And it very much kind of, yeah, it made me smirk because there's a real alignment around that, around, as you said, crisis. People automatically, the word in itself evokes that kind of scaremongering perception of, well, if you're in crisis, the shit must have hit the fan. Like it must be really wrong. And it was interesting for me to hear you say there. It doesn't have to be red button, hit it
No,
crisis. It could
absolutely.
be, as you say, um, we've hit a ceiling. We don't know how to kind of break beyond this. We're going in a good trajectory, but we've hit a bit of a ceiling, maybe systems and processes or people, or yeah, we're kind of growing too fast. And if we don't put some structure in place, we're going to implode from success. And people don't necessarily think of that. And I
So
guess,
it's really interesting that you say that because we thought long and hard around actually calling ourselves a crisis management company. But the reason why we settled on it actually is that's how we are. Is it's the speed that we act is aligned with a crisis situation. We are the trauma doctors. We come in, we fix the patient, we make the patient right again, whatever it is, as we said before, positive, negative, or just really breaking the glass ceiling. We will give the medicine as quickly as we can into that patient and moving on. That's why it's a crisis to us, and we operate in that way. So rather than it actually being the client's crisis, it's really an adjective to describe how we operate. Really, we operate as if it is a crisis, no matter what it is, to get that momentum into businesses. Because, as you know yourself, working in it, a consultant can come in and do two things. From my perspective, working with consultants, some are fantastic. Some are in it to really just harvest ideas and position things that companies already know. We're in it to move people on. If we're not there, we're not adding value. Our fee structure means that we don't get paid a percentage of it. That's how confident we are in the value add. That's where ArxNova, again, we don't want to be considered as a traditional management consultant. We're a crisis. You're in your moment of truth. We're here. We're going to help you strategically, cross-functionally, rapidly deal with that problem. And if we don't, we're prepared to put our own skin in the game with our fees. That's a little bit why
yeah,
we used, and it did come back around to, should we use that word because we might actually turn people off because people go, oh my God, we can't have action over in here because they'll think we're shutting the doors. That's
yeah,
not really what we want. It's really, and that might prove to be a mistake, for me in terms of a marketing positioning, but I don't think it will because once people see the value add and the rapid response, that's really where the crisis comes from
yeah.
us.
And time's precious, isn't it? In any kind of business
Mhm.
situation, literally, as the old kind of saying of time is money. If you guys, I don't mean to disrespect typical consultants, but the usual kind of perception is that they'll come in, they'll go through a brief, they'll take it away, they'll start to put a plan together, and it can take time. Whereas what you're saying is you're almost more like either the paramedics or the A team of kind of, the SAS, kind of drop us in, we'll move quickly, we'll deploy, we'll understand, we'll embed into your organization, learn what the problem is, good, bad, whatever, and deploy interventions to get things moving as quickly as possible through that.
Absolutely. Because I say this quite a lot when I write briefs and blogs and articles and things like that. When businesses are, no matter what stage they're in, transitioning through growth or transitioning into an expert, when we go in, every business needs a level of care or medicine, I call it. I always use the medical analogy, I apologize, but but it's all about what level of dosage you need to give the patient. Because if you start the product, if you, for example, come into ArxNova and you say, look, help us set up well, so we're on solid foundations, we're moving forward. The medicine that the patient has to take is much more gradual. It can have time, it can organically grow, it can build in a structured and sensible way. And this has happened to us where we went into clients who have actually been investigated by the police or they've got regulatory intervention. That medicine the dosage has to be immediate. It has to go in because there isn't the time to save the business otherwise. And that's what I would say to clients. Whenever you bring us in, the medicine will be delivered. It's just the dosage that'll be different that you have to take. And that's sometimes hard for founders to take, and because it's their baby and they don't really want anyone to tell them hard truth. But reality is, because we put ourselves on such a time constriction and because we put a success element on our feet, we haven't got the time to be, we are the critical friend from day one that we don't like the idea of saying, because a lot of businesses will operate because there's internal politics or things like that. That's the benefit of sometimes bringing an external, not just us, other consultants. They cut through that. They get straight to the point of, why do you work that way? It makes no operational sense. And that's really another issue.
When I was talking to you, I was talking about kind of why this podcast came about. And it was very simply on the fact that, I am not, or I wasn't a business leader prior to doing this. I was not an experienced CEO or an MD. I decided to launch my own business. I knew I was good at what I did. I knew I could kind of compete against other operators out there. And I wanted to do it on my terms and drive better service, standards, innovative solutions into the marketplace. And I couldn't do that on someone else's payroll. So launched the business, and suddenly I found myself, and this is a journey I had to go through, no longer a recruiter, now a business leader and a business owner. And I didn't know anything about finance, bit about marketing, but didn't know about kind of operations, go-to-market strategy, things like that. And you had to learn all that. So I'd learned it through, well, 6 years now, 6-year journey, and I'm still learning. And I've done it through webinars, books, other podcasts, basically as much as I can consume through that to help me become better at doing what I do. And the same story applies to a lot of small to medium sized business owners out there. They may be good at what they do. They come up with a product, maybe been working in a service-based industry and think there's a gap where they can do it better. Start off and things can be going well, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And you could be limiting yourself. You might be running a risk by not covering all bases. I know plenty of organizations who appoint through friends rather than through skills and expertise. So maybe they've got the wrong people in the wrong seats. And that's a risk to the business, or it's hindering the business, or it's destructive to the business at some points as well. Whereas what you're offering is that solution of not only will we come in if, things are going south and they're going quickly and you need to put not just a plaster on it, but we need some serious intervention and kind of rebuild around it. But actually we'll come in and look at your business and how can we go through that kind of transition mode to kind of get you to the next level? Because going back to exactly what we said a second ago, time is precious and time is money, and days can very quickly turn into weeks, can turn into months before you know it.
And I think everything you said there is absolutely on the money in terms of most people who start businesses have either got a gap in the market or they've learned from experience, or as I always say, you can learn two ways: experience or exposure. Now, and that exposure sometimes can be baptisms of fire. From a personal perspective, I was a director at 34 of a large consumer law firm. I've previously always only been a number two. So then I was thrust into the limelight. It's a whole different ballgame. You learn on the job. We were owned by a private equity firm. I didn't know anything about private equity. I had to learn all about product parameters. But that exposure then helped me move into my next role. And then that helps you to refine the offer. And as you look back, as you say, the hindsight, you look back. What we're trying to do is give that practical knowledge into people that we've been exposed to through our own personal experiences, and that can sometimes shortcut your problem because, and this isn't people who have worked at medium level. I was a director, Simon's been a director, Joe has run his own company as well. And then we've also worked at senior levels in different areas. So that there is a whole different thing of, can this cross-functional advice make it easier for me to make the right decision? Because I've also sat in interim COO seats, CEO seats in businesses that are struggling and have failed. And that's not me saying, because this isn't saying we've got a perfect track record. We have failed some of the projects that we've been on, and they've unfortunately had to go into insolvency or administration. But what I find from that situation is when you're talking to people, they're all giving you advice, and that advice is all valid. However, it all is from their lens. So your company lawyers will say something to you, your marketing people, your external marketing people, and your internal marketing people, and then also your operational functions. You might have external investments. You might have every single person will be giving you advice, but that advice is always through their own lens, and that lens isn't sometimes what you need to make the right decision to move one step forward. Not because they'll be thinking 3 or 4 steps, 5 steps from their own agendas. So what we would like to do is say, look, whatever the situation you're in, bring us in. We've got experience of working in different sectors. We've got the experience of sitting in the seat you're in, and let us help you make that next step. Just the one. Let's worry about this one and then move to the next one. Because as you say, otherwise you'll have 57 different meetings, which again is wasting time. And actually you'll come out more confused, because I've sat there and thought, I don't actually know what to do next here, because there's conflicting advice between the two different things. So really, as you said, it is key for me with founders who get going, who and are loads of these people are extremely intelligent people. They actually know the answer to what you're saying. And when you sit down, it's just really they don't want to face it, or they don't know a lot of the time what's the correct process to face it. Because then if and 9 times out of 10, once they understand where the roadmap ends, and let's work back from that, they actually become much more attuned to doing it, and they get through it and they'll move forward. And sometimes, even if it's in a negative way, it's a relief. You can see it on the person's face that they've gone out my way. I don't like the end point, but at least I know how to get there now. And that's sometimes where we can add value to it.
Yeah. And I guess there's a touch of denial within it as well. Nobody wants to admit that maybe things aren't going as well as they want to. There's, a lot of external pressure. There's maybe pride. There's maybe,
absolutely.
If you employ a number of people and they're all turning to you, you don't want to kind of admit that maybe things aren't going wrong, because suddenly, rumor mill starts very, very quickly. So it's, there's a lot of that I would suspect there's a lot of kind of denial from a lot of kind of business leaders. You can see the signs, you start to see the signs. And we spoke off air, a mistake that I made a few years ago. I saw the red flags, but I thought, we'll just stick with it. The situation will change, it'll improve, and it didn't. And I ended up coming to the decision that I should have come to 6 months later than I should have done it. I knew it was there. I delayed it. It was detrimental to the business. We're still here, but it was a real lesson learned of going, I should have acted much, much sooner, but I was in denial. I really was. And thankfully it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But look, the signs were there.
Pressures, though, Martin, isn't there? There's so many pressures on people who are in this situation, because as you say, that a lot of the people, particularly people who start a business like yourself, your self-worth is wrapped up in that business, because you have this is mine, this is my baby, this is what I've created. Then you've got the human element, and you never ever want to let people down who work for you. I know everyone makes out that all corporate people are a bank of evil, but really there's human stories behind everything, and no one really wants to make anyone redundant or, and you end up making bad decisions because of them human emotional elements, right? And I know that sounds really cold and calculated, but it's literally, you've got to live in the world you're in, not what you want it to be. And that's sometimes what we say.
that was exactly part of my problem. I was carrying, we'd grown the team based on, kind of the way the market was and success I'd hired. And then the bubble popped, and it did for most of the recruitment industry. And I was left with the team, and the incoming revenue wasn't, replicating the kind of the cost base of the team. But I was there thinking, well, such and such, she's got a family and kids and a mortgage to pay. And, I was going through everyone's personal story, and I didn't want to kind of go through the redundancy process. And I thought, well, we'll just keep going, and things will improve. Um, and it's hard not to kind of pull that human element into it. And that's where
And
sometimes
sometimes
bringing in and having a
sometimes it
conversation
can
with
come
someone
through.
externally.
And sometimes it can come through, as you say, if you get the right medicine, you could, but sometimes there's external factors that, which sounds like in your case, that nothing could have saved it really in terms of where you were. But some clients we go into, it's clear as day that there's just so much operational wastage that they really could tighten up and move forwards, and restructuring can be done.
But that's
We
where
can
I was.
bring
I was
family.
operational. That's exactly where I was. Operational wastage. I was just being naive, not naive, but denial around it all. And I could have done with someone coming and telling me, just going, "Fine, cut." As horrible as it is, cut there.
As horrible as it is, and then that but and that's always the negative end of the guild, isn't it? So we're normally brought in and to make them tough calls and give you that medicine and give you that advice, and also help you through it. So we bring finance and people in who we've got, funders, private equity. We come in, white knight investors, stuff like that. We can help with that, but we can only help if you're prepared to engage as an owner with that, because a lot of that, again, it is wrapped up in self belief, isn't it? And I don't need help. I'm going to do it this way. I've got a different way of working. All of which are absolutely valid as well. There's a lot of businesses that sometimes we come out of and we go, look, we just couldn't help you. That's fine, but you don't go your own way. But 9 times out of 10, it's the boring, structural, getting your underpin right, getting your solid foundations right, getting some external lenses put on the businesses in all the key sectors, and also putting some, different emotional drivers into the founders, and saying, look, if this is what you're building this business for, then you are focusing on the wrong things. And that is also where Simon is particularly good at that, of saying, look, what is it that you're looking to achieve? Because if it's simply to run a business to keep everybody else, employed, that's a very valuable social worth type of position to take. But then your product offering isn't right. You're not
Yeah.
really going to be able, and your funding definitely isn't right, and that's where we'll be challenging you. So it's so hard. People, again, I'm talking at it like we've got all the answers. We haven't. That's why we've got people like yourselves, and we've got transformational people who come in after us to help clients go through that re-energize and restructuring journey, such as Casterian, and we've got Rambutan, and we've got also external tax advisors and things like that. All of these people who we don't like to leave a client. We like to have the hard conversations with the client, reset the client, restructure the client in the right way, start them as this going into the client. And then if the client wants to do it themselves, great, we move forward and let them do that with a structured plan. Or if the client says, no, this is just too much for me now, I want to move forward, we can arrange for that to be done through our own transformational partners. And, hire is a key link to us in that, because as we've said off air, and I think you've alluded to on this card, 9 times out of 10 as well, it's people that will be somewhat of the problem. And that getting rid of somebody, but bringing somebody in who's got the skill set you need, who fits what your cultural objectives are, is another tough conversation, but something that we're hopeful that, Hire are really going to help us with, because clients as well don't know where to find these people, because they're not
Exactly.
easy to find. I think they're really not.
No, not to find the right people for the right role. It takes, you've got to go through a kind of proper search process for it, and it's not just posting an advert out there. Fantastic. Look, we've come to kind of the end of it. But I think it's really kind of put a spotlight on the situation. For me, crisis doesn't have to be that kind of negative connotation. It's about let's just come in and look at your business and help And if people do want to have a kind of conversation with you, what's the best? How should they get in touch?
Obviously, we've got a website. I'm sure we can link it to when we put this
Yeah,
podcast out. We've
yeah,
got online forums and things like that. There's direct emails on there as well if you want to reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn as well. You know, there's a big presence on LinkedIn from all of us. And again, even if it is just this conversation or the message to start a conversation, it might, for the further information, we're more than happy to have an initial contact with you. There'll be no charge for that. It'll just really to be able to see if we can add value to you.
yeah. I think that's what a lot of people worry about, kind of approaching consultants and specialists around. It's kind of the initial cost, and a lot of the time, a lot of people say, "Let's just have a chat. Let's see if we can help you. Don't worry about the cost. You know, we'll just explore it in a kind of a briefing session. And can we help you? We might not be. We might be able to put you somewhere else. Or actually, you're okay. You know, don't worry about
Yeah,
things. And sometimes it's just
100%.
having that, lean on your network and have a conversation with people. So, Chris, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care. Bye.